When life gets stressful and I want more than anything to just unwind, there's one show that I always find myself coming back to. One comfort show that will always reign above all others. It's a show that does an amazing job of bringing me back down to earth, but at the same time brings me back to the good old days of my early childhood. The days before bills, adult obligations, and back pain. And that show is none other than SpongeBob SquarePants. Shows like SpongeBob are honestly once in a lifetime. Before it came around, there was no other show like it, and since it started, there hasn't been any others like it. It's just truly unique and original, especially when it comes to the early seasons. They really just had that secret formula that not only resulted in success for the show and the network, but also really resonated with multiple generations of people. Through and through, it just has that perfect mix that encapsulated what really made late 90s and early 2000s Nicktoons so special. Looking at the first season, the art style and animation was a sight to behold. It felt so new and fresh, but on that same note, it also came across very rustic and almost rugged. On top of the art, the gags were just the perfect mix of feeling well thought out, but at the same time, incredibly random. The first season of SpongeBob SquarePants will always hold a very special place in my heart. I have so many fond memories of watching it, and I can safely say that Season 1 of SpongeBob was likely my first run-in with nostalgia that gave me positive feelings. I remember when Seasons 2 and 3 were well underway, a majority of the reruns that Nick would play were from those seasons. In comparison, it wasn't nearly as frequent that they would rerun Season 1 episodes. Around that time, I ended up going to Hollywood Video with my mom and renting a copy of SpongeBob Season 1 on DVD. I watched it, and I was just enamored with the feeling of seeing episodes that I had completely forgotten about because they hadn't been played in years. Specifically, the Valentine's Day episode and the Paper episode. Seeing those episodes a few years later was mind-blowing to me, and it brought back so many good feelings. It was new to me because before that, nostalgia just kind of made me scared and feeling like time was passing too quick. It made me feel like life was just passing me by and like the good old days would be over before I know it. However, the comfort of revisiting SpongeBob Season 1 when I was a kid is a memory that I will always cherish. As Season 1 came to an end though, and Season 2 would push forward, there was admittedly a big difference that I couldn't help but notice. Personally, I felt like as time went on, the show just got funnier and funnier. Don't get me wrong, Season 1 had a lot of really funny moments, but Seasons 2 and 3 are just full of pure comedic gold. The jokes were absolutely side-splitting, and it almost felt like the show was going in a different direction, but in a really good way. The progression between the first few seasons was executed flawlessly, and I have to commend the show's crew for that. Far too often, shows tend to decline after Season 1, but SpongeBob didn't end up falling into that category. They had built up some amazing momentum, and they were able to continue that momentum for an impressive amount of time. And that's why today, on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're gonna embark on a journey. It's a journey that's familiar, yet new, all at the same time. If you've been following me for a while now, you might recall that I spent a large amount of time dissecting and reviewing Season 1 of SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, that started in April of 2022 and officially finished in May of 2023 for a whopping nearly 7 hours total. Just in case you missed it, I'll have the whole 7-hour compilation linked in the description box below on one easy video. I implore you to check it out if you haven't already. It was a year-long journey that really meant a lot to me. Instead of focusing on the dark and morbid aspects of the show, it was meant purely for admirational purposes. Just some time for me to reflect about everything that I absolutely love about Season 1 of SpongeBob. Now, since then, I have had countless comments requesting that I do the same for Season 2, and that's exactly what we're gonna start today. Especially with the entire community celebrating 25 years of SpongeBob SquarePants, Now just really feels like the perfect time for us to embark on this journey together. I can't lie to you guys, I am so incredibly excited for this. Just looking at the list of episodes that are ahead of me, I am pumped to dive back down to Bikini Bottom and just take some time to look back on what made Season 2 of SpongeBob so spectacular. With that being said, grab yourself a drink and a snack and get comfy. It's gonna be a long journey, and I'm happy that we get to go on it together. Thank you so much for clicking on this video and for being a part of my YouTube journey. With that being said, let's dive right into it. Season 2 of SpongeBob really just comes out swinging right out the gate. It all starts out with the episode called Your Shoe is Untied. This episode starts out with SpongeBob sitting on his recliner in his living room watching TV with a very satisfied look on his face. Come to find out that he's watching a live action show consisting of a sea anemone dancing.
Gary! I was just looking for the sports channel, Gary.
Just then, there's a knock at the door as Patrick arrives. He happily shows SpongeBob his new shoes, but when SpongeBob asks him if he can maybe see them on his feet, Patrick rather apprehensively offers to instead show him what they look like on his hands. After SpongeBob plays into the gag a little bit, Patrick comes clean with him, admitting that he actually doesn't know how to tie his shoes.
Do you know how lucky you are to have a friend like me?
Yes.
Look at this knot. Have you ever seen a more perfectly executed shoe fastening bow?
Gosh, probably not.
I learned when I was just a boy, Patrick, and I'm willing to pass on what I know. Go sit over there and let an old pro show you how to do it.
Patrick excitedly sits down on the couch while SpongeBob hoists his leg up onto the couch arm to show him how it's done. SpongeBob unties his shoe and starts to explain, but quickly he starts to panic when he realizes that he actually has no idea what he's doing. He decides to untie his other shoe, thinking that starting with his right foot instead is the way to go. But when he tries multiple times, the knots he creates just kind of undo themselves.
No more fooling around. I got it!
What was that? Are you okay, SpongeBob?
Patrick, aren't you late for something?
The poop deck, you're right. We'll have to do this lesson later. Bye, SpongeBob!
I can't believe I've forgotten how to tie my own shoes. They've been tied for as long as I can remember.
SpongeBob hopes that he'll be able to remember how to tie his shoes after a good night of sleep, but when he wakes up in the morning to his untied shoes, he's still unsure of what to do. He brushes it off, saying that he'll remember sooner or later, and just like that we see him head off for work. He goes to take one step and immediately faceplants as he steps on his own laces. However, he doesn't let that stop him from trying. We see SpongeBob faceplant his way to the Krusty Krab, and when he falls through the door, he's shocked to see Patrick sitting at a table, eating a Krabby Patty with his shoes still on his hands.
Oh no, I can't let Patrick see I still haven't tied my shoes.
Hey, SpongeBob, you're shorter. Have you been dieting?
Well, a sponge has to look his spongiest. Well, I've got to get to work.
SpongeBob faceplants into the kitchen, saying maybe he should just lay here, but Squidward reminds him that the patties aren't going to cook themselves. SpongeBob drags himself over to the grill and stands in front of it, feeling thankful that he can pretty much just stand in front of the grill all day and not have to walk. However, that thankful feeling quickly disappears when Squidward tells him to walk the patty over to him.
Hey, Squidward, I've got an idea. How about you come get it?
Oh, gee, SpongeBob, that's a great idea. And maybe I should cook the patties and do the dishes and wear square pants and live in a pineapple while you wait in the unemployment line.
No!
Then bring that patty here now.
SpongeBob makes an honest attempt to walk the patty over to Squidward, but of course he trips over his own shoelaces yet again, and he ends up throwing the patty directly into Squidward's mouth. Squidward chokes the patty down as SpongeBob makes another one.
Let me just... Sorry, Squid. Sorry.
What's the holdup? I think my heart just stopped. It's SpongeBob's fault!
Those words that Squidward said end up echoing in SpongeBob's head as he feels like he's failed and that his career is over. He lays there crying. Meanwhile, we see Mr. Krabs sitting on the toilet and doing a crossword puzzle when he hears the sound of unsatisfied customers in the lobby.
We're going to the chum bucket!
Wait! Don't go!
Oh yeah, we are definitely out of here.
Yes!
Wait! Go! That's me money walking out the door! What's the meaning of this, Mr. Squidward?
It's SpongeBob's fault.
Mr. Krabs blows his stack as he yells for SpongeBob to get out there. We see SpongeBob faceplant slowly through the door, and Mr. Krabs asks him what's going on.
Yes. Out with it, boy! What is it?
I forgot how to tie my shoes.
Ha ha! That's all?
So you show me how?
I don't wear shoes.
Oh!
SpongeBob ends up desperately running around, hoping to find someone who knows how to tie shoes. But unfortunately, none of the other fish in the sea wear shoes, so of course they don't know how to tie a knot.
Could you show me how to tie a simple knot? Could you show me how to tie my shoes? Could you show me how to tie my shoes?
I be just a painting of a head.
SpongeBob gets frustrated as he falls to his knees, yelling about how nobody knows how to tie a knot. Just then, though, lightning strikes and day quickly turns to night as the ghastly green glow of the Flying Dutchman surrounds SpongeBob ominously. The Dutchman gloats to SpongeBob, telling him that he's been the winner of the Fancy Knottin' contest for the last 3,000 years.
You're gonna have to not do that. And stop staring at me with them big old eyes. Now stand back and watch me be naughty.
The Dutchman shows SpongeBob all sorts of knots, like the square knot, the gut knot, and of course my personal favorite, the poop loop.
Poop! Ah! Those are great, Mr. Flying Dutchman, sir. Now can you show me how to tie my shoes?
I don't know how to tie me shoes. I haven't worn shoes for over 5,000 years. But sometimes I like to wear this little sock over me ghostly tail.
The Flying Dutchman, with his little sock, flies off to Davy Jones's locker while SpongeBob drags himself home. He gets through the door as Gary tries to greet him, but SpongeBob brushes him off, saying that he's not in the mood and that he just wants to be left alone. We see SpongeBob make his way back to his bed and lay face down in his slump of sadness.
Okay, Gary, you have my attention. Oh! Gary! Well, I'll be. You can tie shoes!
SpongeBob, being impressed by Gary's shoe tying abilities, asks how he learned how to do that. Just then, Gary's shell lifts up as we see a turntable underneath with a record that he starts spinning. The episode comes to an end with a very catchy song about learning how to tie your shoes.
Take a lace in each hand, you go over and under again. You make a loop-de-loop and pull, and your shoes are looking cool.
Man, that song is just so catchy. It's another one that I found myself randomly getting stuck in my head over the years since I first saw this episode. That's one thing that I truly love about the early seasons of SpongeBob. They had a very effective approach to the songs that they featured in the show early on. And this actually started all the way back in the first episode of Season 1. It's the episode Help Wanted, where SpongeBob gets his job at the Krusty Krab by making endless Krabby Patties for the sea of anchovies that bombard the restaurant. We get this iconic scene of him dancing around the kitchen as he makes Krabby Patties to the tune of Livin' in the Sunlight, Lovin' in the Moonlight by Tiny Tim. That scene has been burned into my brain for decades now, and I absolutely love it. This scene, though, definitely hits me really hard. Don't get me wrong, I love it so much, and it's a really iconic moment in the series' history. But for me personally, it just brings a flood of emotions in retrospect. This song is none other than Loop De Loop, written by the band Ween just for this episode. Now, you might not know this, but Ween was a huge influence on SpongeBob's creator, Steven Hillenburg. He's gone on record saying that he's a huge fan of the band and that their 1997 album The Mollusk was what inspired him to create SpongeBob SquarePants in the first place. When Steven Hillenburg passed away in late 2018, the band made a post on Facebook reflecting on their relationship with the show. The post was a link to their song Loop De Loop on YouTube, and the caption said, "I got a call a long time ago from a marine biologist that said he wanted to start a cartoon inspired by Ween's album The Mollusk." His name was Steven Hillenburg, and his idea was to create a Bugs Bunny type cartoon on the bottom of the ocean floor. Ween had been on tour for a long year, and we ended up recording and writing this song in one night at Greg Frey's studio. It was to teach kids how to tie their shoes, and we wrote it really fast and mailed it back on Christmas Eve, and for once, they said, "Don't change anything about it, it's perfect." It remains one of our proudest legacies, and we went on to do a lot of work together with SpongeBob, and the show went on to be the best cartoon of 2 generations. So this is for you, Steve. The show wasn't even on the air at the time, mind you. In hindsight, it hits really hard knowing that this scene right here was likely a huge moment for Steven Hillenburg. One of his favorite bands had agreed to be a part of his creation that they had influenced, and this scene right here was the fruit of that labor. It's heartwarming to know that this was as much of a proud moment for them as it was for him. On top of that, though, we have to take into consideration how their collaboration had played out in the long run and how it would have an effect on the legacy of this show. Now, it's no secret that Steven Hillenburg left the show in 2004. This was due to creative differences with the Nickelodeon executives. He had wanted Season 3 to be the final season of the show, with the ending of the story being the first SpongeBob SquarePants movie that premiered in November of 2004. I remember clear as day seeing that movie in theaters. Its ending would see SpongeBob saving Bikini Bottom and the Krusty Krab, as Mr. Krabs names SpongeBob the new manager of the Krusty Krab 2. SpongeBob jumps into the air with joy as the credits roll to the iconic song Ocean Man from the album that inspired the show, none other than The Mollusk by Ween. This right here was meant to be the bookend for the story. I remember being a little kid and sitting there watching the credits roll as I started to cry because I didn't want it to be over. Even to this day, 20 years later, every time I hear the song, it still makes me cry. It makes me cry because I realize that was the point where my childhood comfort show would never really be the same again. When the creator left, the show really shifted in a different direction that just never felt the same again, and it ultimately didn't really resonate with me. Part of me relates that memory with around the time where my life took a big step in a different direction, and a lot of my childhood wonder had started to shift to teen angst, and honestly, that hurts in and of itself. I feel like deep down inside, the fact that Ocean Man makes me cry is because I correlate it with the ending of my childhood. But with the passing of Steven Hillenburg all these years later, and coming to realize that if he had his way, this is where the story would have ended, it just kinda brings a whole other wave of sadness to all the other existing feelings. It's one of those things where it's a good mixture of sad that it was over and happy that it had happened in the first place. Knowing that he had the opportunity to work directly with Ween, and how sweet of a moment that likely was for him, makes me appreciate Loop-de-Loop and the animation sequence that goes along with it so much more. Personally, I look back at this song with a lot of admiration and joy. This right here was a point where the show was at its best, and the entire sequence features all sorts of different Polynesian style patterns and backgrounds that would be featured in a lot of the show's title cards, and of course, the intro song. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This art style is something that the show utilized in a very fantastic way in my opinion. It's one of those things where the combination of their rough and rustic kind of art style applied to that Polynesian kind of pattern really results in a truly charming and iconic look that has come to be synonymous with SpongeBob SquarePants. An excellent example of this is the title card for this episode. It has that exact kind of art style, but featuring some flowers which give it kind of a Hawaiian feel to it, and of course, that title card music. This was something that I brought up a lot throughout my videos about Season 1, and it's something that I'm probably going to be happily bringing up again throughout this season because it really is a huge factor that added to the charm of this show. Like, sure, the comedy, animation, and the characters are the meat and potatoes of the show itself, but the small things like the title cards and intro sequence are like the icing on the cake that really hones in the true charm of the early seasons of SpongeBob. Outside of my emotional connections to this show and the art style itself though, there is just so much substance to this specific episode. This one is truly a fantastic start to Season 2 in my opinion, and it was overall very well executed. Right out the gate they hit us with a very iconic scene that made everyone, especially the adults in the room, laugh. We see SpongeBob sitting in his chair, just oh so intrigued by this anemone that's dancing on screen. The joke, of course, being that he was watching something inappropriate. As a kid, I personally thought that, like, they were making a joke that he was embarrassed by Gary walking in on him watching this because it was supposed to be like ballet or maybe like a Richard Simmons-esque workout video. Man, rest in peace, Richard Simmons. Oh, that's so sad. But the underlying joke is definitely apparent looking back as an adult. I really admire the way that they so cleanly portrayed this. For me, as a kid, my mind was always in the gutter. I was a little kid who thought that fart jokes were just hilarious, and to me, growth and development class was the absolute funniest thing in the world. However, even for a kid like me, the joke went completely over my head. As an adult, though, I did a little more research to better understand what exactly was happening here because I had a sneaking suspicion that there was some further substance behind this joke, and boy was I right. This anemone dancing on screen is likely in the process of reproduction. Some of them have the ability to reproduce on their own, which consists of the anemone splitting itself in half and regenerating, thus producing another anemone. Meanwhile, others will reproduce with the help of another anemone, which consists of them doing a little dancey dance before they spurt out their seed to reproduce with other anemones. What SpongeBob was watching, I'm pretty sure was the latter of those two. Now, moving along from there, I really appreciated Patrick's role in this episode. I find it hilarious that Patrick has literally never worn shoes, or even anything other than shorts for that matter, yet all of a sudden he shows up at SpongeBob's house showing off a brand new pair of shoes. In all reality though, I can't help but wonder, where did he get them? Like, nobody else in Bikini Bottom other than SpongeBob and apparently Gary wears shoes, so odds are there isn't a shoe store anywhere down there. I do, however, have to point out though, one little continuity error. There is at least one other fish that we do know of that also wears shoes, and that would be none other than Mrs. Puff. Ever since Season 1, her character model has had shoes on. So by that logic, couldn't he have just asked her to teach him how to tie his shoes? I mean, she absolutely hates him, so the odds of her actually wanting to teach him are pretty low, but I just wanted to point that out considering that they kind of played it off like nobody else in Bikini Bottom had worn shoes. Circling back to Patrick though, I also have to point out how wholesome his friendship with SpongeBob is portrayed throughout this entire season, for the most part. In this episode specifically, it's this scene right here that really emphasizes it.
Do you know how lucky you are to have a friend like me?
The tone and inflection in Patrick's voice right there really portrays just how much he does value his friendship with SpongeBob and how he really does feel lucky to have a friend like him. We would see this same kind of sentiment echoed in future episodes, in future seasons, but it's something that they clearly made a point of showing early on, and I can definitely appreciate that. SpongeBob and Patrick are the epitome of best friendship. Seeing them and how they are really reminds me of my best friend growing up. Our friendship was very similar to SpongeBob and Patrick's. We were just two goofy kids doing and saying random ridiculous stuff just for the fun of it, and at the core, we really valued each other's friendship. Relationships like that are truly special, and it makes my heart very happy to see how this show takes the time to show the appreciation for that kind of friendship every so often. As far as Patrick is concerned, I definitely have to point out SpongeBob arriving for work in the morning with untied shoes to see Patrick and another customer sitting down at the tables already. I always found it so funny how Patrick still had his shoes on his hands and is just eating his Krabby Patty with the shoes. However, I will admit, I find myself questioning how could they all be eating patties if SpongeBob isn't at work and behind the grill yet? As far as we know, he's the only fry cook at the Krusty Krab. I mean, we all know it definitely wasn't Squidward because he can't make a Krabby Patty to save his life. I guess, all things considered, it was likely made by Mr. Krabs, but we can rest assured that thankfully at least it wasn't Squidward. On top of that though, when SpongeBob stomps his feet through the floorboards, I nearly did a spit take with my coffee. I completely forgot about that gag, and ever since I was a kid, this always made me die laughing. The way that Patrick walks up to him and points out that he's gotten shorter and asks if he's been dieting is just way too funny to me. Then of course, the way SpongeBob completely decimates the floor of the Krusty Krab all the way to the kitchen, all in the name of not letting Patrick see that his shoes are still untied. That whole sequence through and through was just absolutely hilarious, and as far as Patrick's role in this episode goes, I really found it so valuable to the comedic effect in this one. I do also have to point out Squidward though. He's a character that is kind of a bummer seeing him as a kid, but as an adult, especially one who's worked in customer service, he is just beyond comical. The way SpongeBob asks him to come get the patty, and in return he jokes about cooking the patties, wearing square pants, and living in a pineapple while SpongeBob stands in the unemployment line. It's just incredibly hilarious and very relatable on a personal level to those of us who have worked in a retail setting. As far as Squidward goes though, this episode kind of made me have an epiphany of sorts. Some months ago, I made a video about the Patty Vault episode where Squidward admits that he's never had a Krabby Patty and that he never will. That episode, though, is actually from Season 3. With that being said, this right here is proof that that isn't true because he literally just ate a ton of Krabby Patties in this episode. But hey, at least they didn't go straight to his thighs and make him blow up this time. As far as other continuity errors go though, it's worth pointing out that this entire episode is literally based around the fact that SpongeBob doesn't know how to tie his shoes, with it putting an emphasis on the fact that they've been tied for as long as he can remember. However, if you look back at our review of Season 1, you might recall the episode where he takes Pearl to the prom and he dresses up as Mr. Long, Tan, and Handsome. In that episode, we see him not only tie his own shoes, but also the shoes at the bottom of his stilts that he's wearing to make him appear taller. On top of that, we also saw him tie his own shoes in the Rock Bottom episode while he was waiting for the bus to get out of Rock Bottom. Again, just another minor continuity error, but with that being said, it's one that really contradicts the entire premise of this entire episode. Reflecting on this episode further though, I definitely want to point out that I really appreciated the use of the Flying Dutchman and his knot tying abilities. Historically speaking, sailors have had to utilize a wide variety of knots while working on ships at sea, so of course the Flying Dutchman being a ghostly sailor, it makes sense that he would be so familiar with a wide variety of knots. On that note though, the irony of him not being able to tie a simple knot for shoes is just something else. This guy has memorized the monkey chain, the monkey's fist, and the legendary monkey. Yet he can't tie a simple shoelace? On top of that, I always found it so funny that this big, scary, intimidating ghost finds comfort in wearing a little sock at the end of his ghostly tail. Just the way he says it so innocently too always had me cracking up as a kid, and even now as an adult. When it comes to reflecting on the entirety of not only this episode, but also the season as a whole, there's one thing I really don't want to hold against it, and that would be the change in the animation and the art. In my review of Season 1, I really went just on and on about the art style and how the hand-drawn art really had a huge effect on the feel of the season as a whole in a really positive way. It's definitely one aspect that really added to the overall charm of Season 1. However, this episode would be the first to utilize digital ink and paint, which would continue through the rest of the season. So on that note, I just want to make it clear, I'm not going to rate this season or any of its episodes any less based on that fact. The art style changed, and it is what it is. Sure, it feels a little different, but at this point we're still talking about the original run of SpongeBob All Things Considered, and of course, the show had to grow up. As far as this episode goes, we have so much to be thankful for, and I feel like there's so much more I could say. But all things considered, the story was really intriguing, and the comedy was 100% on point. And of course, the cultural relevance was very strong, leading to this one being a truly iconic episode. All in all, we're gonna start out strong and give this episode a 10 out of 10 and keep on swimming along. Next up, we're diving into yet another truly iconic episode, Squid's Day Off. As this episode begins, we see the Krusty Krab on a beautifully sunny spring day while Squidward stands in the doorway lamenting the fact that he's stuck at work.
No one ever comes in on Sunday. Why can't Mr. Krabs just let us go home? SpongeBob, stop ringing this bell.
I was just testing it.
I will ring the bell when there's an order, but there's no customers!
Squidward ends up picking up the cash register and slamming it down in frustration. After he does, the drawer pops open, smacking him in the back and causing money to go flying all over the floor. As that's happening, we cut over to Mr. Krabs' office, where we see him catching ear of the sound of his money falling on the floor.
What's going on out here? My babies. Get away, barbarian. What have you done? Nice, clean money. Soiled. I'll take care of it. Let Papa clean you up. Clear the way! No. Don't cry, little one.
What's wrong, Mr. Krabs?
Mr. Krabs watches the dime roll around the drain until it hops itself right up, winking at him in the process, and goes flying right down the drain. In a panic, Mr. Krabs sticks his claw down the drain to catch it. He's successful in catching it, however, his claw is now stuck in the drain. He asks SpongeBob for help, but when SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs that the answer is to let go of the dime, he doesn't want to hear any of it.
There's got to be another way. Grab me captain's quarters and heave!
Oh no, not again.
Ow!
Right after that, we see Mr. Krabs being carried out on a stretcher by some paramedics. On the way out, he tells Squidward that he's in charge of things around the restaurant while he's away. Squidward happily accepts that responsibility, and seconds after Mr. Krabs is gone, he tells SpongeBob that as new manager, he's going to be giving SpongeBob a promotion.
You get to run the cash register.
The cash register? Wow! Squidward, who's gonna work the grill?
You are. It's part of the promotion I mentioned earlier. You'll be wearing 2 hats now. You're gonna take the orders, then you're gonna make them.
This is the best day of my life.
SpongeBob asks Squidward what he's gonna do now since SpongeBob is manning both the register and the grill, and Squidward tells him that he's got some very important boss-like errands to run. Squidward goes to leave, but on his way out, SpongeBob stops him, telling him that he has no idea how to work the cash register.
You push the button and put the money inside. Okay, you're on your own.
I can't believe this is really happening. Today, I start living!
Squidward walks down the road, talking to himself about how happy he is to have a day of relaxation with pay. However, it's not long after that he admits how he feels kind of bad for SpongeBob being stuck there alone all day.
He's probably just standing at the register with that stupid grin on his face.
Hey, SpongeBob!
Hey, Patrick!
Hey, SpongeBob, could you give me change for a quarter?
No problem! Here you go!
Thanks.
I forgot to tell him how to make change! Ow!
Squidward storms through the door of the Krusty Krab to find SpongeBob just standing there like he assumed that he would be. Squidward immediately walks right up to check the register, and luckily everything seems to be in order. SpongeBob asks him if he's finished with those errands, but Squidward makes an excuse saying that he just came back because he forgot that he needs change for $1.
Do you want 4 quarters, or 10 dimes, or 20 nickels, or 100 pennies, or 1 quarter, 3 dimes, 7 nickels, and 10 pennies? Or if you give me a $5 bill, your options are...
All right, goodbye.
Just like that, we cut on over to Squidward's house where he's outside sunbathing and trying to convince himself that he has nothing to worry about because there won't even be any customers today.
He'll probably just stand there bored. SpongeBob, bored.
Getting kind of bored.
Squidward runs right for the Krusty Krab, fearing the worst, but he stops himself, realizing that his imagination is just running wild and that the odds of SpongeBob burning down the Krusty Krab are very low. He ends up walking back home, but on his way, a fire truck rolls past him going code 3 towards the direction of the Krusty Krab. And just like that, Squidward is bursting through the door with a fire extinguisher, spraying it all over the place, despite lack of evidence pointing towards a fire.
May I help you, sir?
It's me, you dunce!
Oh, hi, Squidward! How are those errands going?
What's that supposed to mean? I'm very busy.
Well, I'm sure you are.
I don't like your tone.
I'm sure you are. How's that?
Just do your jobs.
Aye, aye, Mr. Tentacles.
After that, we cut back to Squidward's house, where he's trying really hard to force himself to relax, despite his anxious mind fearing the worst. He nearly breaks his back, forcing himself to sit down, as he starts telling himself not to worry so much.
Repeat after me. You will not go back to the Krusty Krab.
I will destroy the Krusty Krab.
SpongeBob!
Have you finished?
No! That's it. That's it. No matter what sick fantasies run through my mind, I will not go back to that restaurant.
After that, we get a nice montage of Squidward running back and forth from his house to the Krusty Krab over and over again, each time with SpongeBob asking about the errands.
Have you finished those errands? 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 Have you finished those errands?
No, I am not finished with those errands, and I never will be! So quit checking up on me!
Squidward walks up to SpongeBob, clearly starting to lose his mind, as he yells about how he knows that SpongeBob is forcing him to keep coming back every time he messes something up. SpongeBob attempts to defend himself, but Squidward cuts him off, saying that he may not have messed up yet, but he will.
When you do, I'll be there! I'll be there!
Gosh, Squidward sure is a hard worker. He makes me proud to wear these hats.
Back at Squidward's house, we see him completely off his rocker. locking and welding his front door shut so that he has no choice but to stay home and enjoy himself. He convinces himself that he's not even going to think about you-know-who at the you-know-where. We see Squidward walk into his bathroom as he draws himself a nice bubble bath and finally decides to take it easy.
Let Squid's day off. What was that? It's SpongeBob. He's spying on me to see if I'm really doing errands. but he left his post.
Squidward confronts SpongeBob, who he believes is outside of his window, but he's surprised to find out that it's not actually SpongeBob, it's just some coral branches rubbing up against his house, which is resulting in a noise similar to SpongeBob's laughter. After that, Squidward sees what looks like a silhouette of SpongeBob on the other side of his shower curtain, but he pulls it open abruptly to find that it's just his toilet that's conveniently shaped like SpongeBob wearing the two hats.
If I let this get to me again, I'll just end up running down to the Krusty Krab, bursting through the front door up to that yellow headache SpongeBob, and he'll say,
Hi, Squidward. Are you finished with those errands yet?
I know you're in here. He's headed back to the Krusty Krab! I'll beat him there!
Squidward ends up sprinting right through his front door that he welded shut and down the street, donning nothing but his shower cap and some bubbles covering his lower half. We see him run past a lady with her kid, as well as Patrick, before he passes the hospital where Mr. Krabs is being discharged.
Okay, Mr. Krabs, get plenty of rest, and if things don't seem right, come back.
Thanks, Doc.
SpongeBob, you can't beat me!
Squidward makes his way to the Krusty Krab, where he confronts SpongeBob, who's just sitting behind the cash register. He tells him that he's caught him, saying that he knows that SpongeBob was the stick outside of his window, as well as the toilet in his bathroom. But when he starts explaining how SpongeBob swam down the drain and beat him back to the Krusty Krab, he realizes just how crazy all of this sounds, connecting the dots that all of this was just his imagination running wild.
Does that mean you're...
Yes, SpongeBob! I am finished with those errands. I guess I want to take my place back at the cash register. I really do.
Then you might want to put these on.
As Squidward puts on SpongeBob's pants, we see SpongeBob walk over to the front door, realizing that they forgot to switch the close sign to open.
It's almost like we could have taken the whole day off. Ah! Ah!
Man, this episode is just as great as I remember it being when I was a kid. This one always made me feel kind of weird because of how it portrayed Squidward losing his mind, but all things taken into consideration, I always enjoyed this one. I do have to admit though, SpongeBob saying,
Have you finished those errands? Have you finished those errands? Have you finished those errands?
has been completely burned into my brain for years now because of this episode. Just the tone of his voice and the way he says it is something that I will never be able to forget, even if I tried. Taking it from the top though, one thing that I appreciate so much about this episode is that it did a great job of continuing the established understanding of Mr. Krabs being extremely greedy and money hungry. This episode showed us just how much he's willing to put his own safety on the line for even just a little bit of money. This man was willing to full-blown stick his claw down a drain just for a dime. Now, granted, this was just a normal drain and not like a garbage disposal, but still it makes me feel uncomfortable. If you've ever seen the movie Final Destination 2, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Even if you haven't seen it, odds are you might be familiar with the logging truck accident scene that's featured in that movie. That scene in and of itself has become incredibly culturally iconic among horror fans. However, there's another scene in that movie where they tease some guy sticking his hand down a garbage disposal to get a really expensive watch that he dropped down there. Nothing actually happens to his hand and he isn't hurt by the disposal, but the way that they built up the tension in that scene is just extremely remarkable. It's such a good dramatic build-up that even this innocent scene in a children's cartoon gives me flashbacks to it, and it gives me the absolute heebie-jeebies as a result. In all reality, though, it's actually kind of funny when you think about how much Mr. Krabs cares about money in the context of this episode. Like, he was willing to potentially risk getting hundreds of dollars in medical bills from having his arms ripped off in exchange for saving himself from losing 10 cents, which I'm pretty sure he ended up losing anyways when his arms came off. On top of that, the fact that he felt the need to wash the change under the sink in the first place was just absolutely ridiculous. He talks to the coins telling them not to cry and that Papa's gonna clean them up, when in all reality, all they did was hit the floor for a few seconds. Odds are they were just as dirty before hitting the floor as they were after hitting it. Like, the irony of him running up and saying nice clean money is just too funny. Money certainly is not clean by any means. I mean, paper money is by far more dirty than coins, but those coins have touched so many different people's hands over the course of their life. The sentence, nice clean money, just feels like a complete contradiction. Aside from that though, I did get a good laugh out of the hilarious amount of things that fell from the shelf and hit Mr. Krabs in the head when he flew against the wall. Like, this one little tiny shelf in the Krusty Krab kitchen was home to certain things that make sense, like a pot, a glass, and a frying pan. Then of course we see an entire treasure chest, an anchor, a full-blown buoy, and a giant diving outfit, all of which were being held up by this one lone shelf. The funniest part though is the fact that Mr. Krabs took all of these things to his head, but the straw that breaks the camel's back is one of the dimes that went flying. Like, of all the things to make him lose consciousness, it was that tiny little dime landing directly on his head lump. Looking back at this as an adult, I got such a good chuckle out of it. As far as the rest of this episode goes though, this one really does a great job of highlighting just how quickly your mind can wander when you're fearing the worst. The mind is a very interesting and powerful thing. Sometimes it's as simple as one worry that ends up making your mind leap to conclusions and beginning to rationalize things that are completely impossible. This is all shown directly through Squidward. Like, this episode full-blown showed him pushing himself into straight-up psychosis. It was a slippery slope for him, which very rapidly went from him going back and forth from his house to the Krusty Krab, all the way to straight-up locking himself inside of his own home as he hallucinates. I have to point out that scene where Squidward is locking up his front door.
To stay here and enjoy myself.
This scene right here is very jarring for a few reasons. First of all, the extreme lengths that he goes to just to trap himself in his own house. It's not enough for him to mentally tell himself that he isn't leaving. He has to straight up put up police tape and actually weld the door shut in an effort to stop it from opening. Then, from there, of course, we have the psychotic look on his face, featuring his pupils being different sizes, his skin being wrinkled to oblivion, and covered in aging spots, and of course his jagged and gnarled teeth. The icing on the cake, though, has to be the music that they put in the background. Like, sure, everything else lays the foundation well, but there's just something about that music that really drives home the status of Squidward's mental state in a very severe way. By all means, what he was doing and the way that he looked was extremely unsettling. However, the music that accompanied all of this was just downright creepy. It really encapsulates the feeling of Squidward losing his mind. The process of Squidward losing it, though, was very extreme. Circling back to an earlier point, it all started with him going back and forth, and it just progressed rapidly from there. We see him imagining the things that SpongeBob is saying and doing while he's away. Then we see him hearing SpongeBob outside of his window, thinking that he's seeing SpongeBob's silhouette as he's hiding outside of Squidward's bathtub, and finally full-blown actually seeing SpongeBob in the tub with him. Sure, SpongeBob wasn't actually there, but in Squidward's mind, this was very real. This leads to Squidward going underwater, and that's the point where things get extra weird. I can't stress enough how much this scene makes me feel so uncomfortable. Like, Squidward dives under and he changes from his normal anthropomorphic squid form into one that resembles an actual squid. There's just something about this squid-like form that really makes me feel the ick. I'm not too sure why, but I think it has something to do with how much we're all used to seeing Squidward in his normal form. We're so used to seeing him shown as having tentacles kinda similar to that of a person's arms and legs that seeing him any other way just is kind of bizarre and creepy. What was even worse than the way that he looked though was the way that he sounded.
I know you're in here.
Like, the way that they tried to stress that he's talking underwater made it almost sound like he was a robot or something. That combined with the general tone of Squidward's voice was just the perfect addition to turn this creepy scene into full-blown nightmare fuel. From start to finish, the way that this episode showed the progression of paranoia turning into full-blown psychotic meltdown was a sight to see. All the meanwhile, I can't help but wonder how bizarre this is from SpongeBob's point of view. This little guy's just standing at his post waiting for anything to happen. But over and over again, the only thing happening is his new manager coming in and becoming more and more manic as time progresses. I did want to take a sec though and point out how funny Squidward's imagination of SpongeBob was at the start. Like, at the beginning, it's clear that Squidward wasn't worried about SpongeBob doing anything intentional to ruin the Krusty Krab. He was more worried that SpongeBob wasn't capable enough to know how to make change. We see this portrayed in the daydream right here that just had me in stitches. The look on SpongeBob and Patrick's faces while they had this conversation in Squidward's mind was just way too funny to me. Like, this right here is the exact representation of how Squidward really perceives SpongeBob and Patrick in his mind, and something about it just makes me so happy. In all reality though, we'd be surprised to find out that money math is actually SpongeBob's strong suit, as seen when Squidward tries to ask him to make change for $1. We see SpongeBob offering him multiple different options for change, all of which were spot on, might I add. Like, under normal conditions, this should have been enough to put Squidward's mind at ease. SpongeBob showed that he was capable both in the kitchen and behind the register. However, Squidward's wandering mind wouldn't accept that, and it just kept pushing him to greater and greater fears. On a different note though, one thing in this episode that really tickled my funny bone was the point where imaginary SpongeBob goes down the drain and Squidward decides that he's gonna beat him back to the Krusty Krab. We see Squidward running out of his house butt naked and past multiple people. The funniest part though has to be when he runs past Patrick.
The truth will be revealed!
Woohoo! Right on, Squidward!
Patrick in these first 3 seasons specifically is just so funny. Him encouraging Squidward, thinking that he's streaking or something along those lines, is absolutely hilarious. Like, in the later seasons, I feel like they played a little too far into Patrick being dumb, and as a result, he wasn't very funny a lot of the time. But this version of Patrick was really utilized in a very different and unique, yet super funny kind of way. Patrick definitely is one of my favorite characters, and this scene was a great example as to why. These early seasons did a good job of painting him as a more oblivious character rather than a dumb one, and that's something that I feel like did his character a lot more favors early on as far as audience enjoyability goes. If there's anything else that I'd like to bring up as it relates to this episode, it's the fact that it takes place on a Sunday. In the beginning, we see Squidward being sad because he's stuck there on a Sunday and nobody ever comes in on Sundays. Then, at the end, it's revealed that all of this happened because they forgot to switch the close sign to open. Now, that one mistake definitely wouldn't be the reason why absolutely no one comes in on Sundays usually, because the odds of them making that same mistake every Sunday are pretty much slim to none. Furthermore, I do have to point out that from a continuity standpoint, the Krusty Krab being closed on Sunday is actually something that's already been established. If we go back to Season 1, you might recall in the episode SB129 where Squidward time travels, he ends up going to the Krusty Krab to hide from SpongeBob and Patrick. The reason that's explained for doing this is that the Krusty Krab is closed on Sunday, so it would make for a nice and quiet place to hide out. Now, with that in mind, them being there on a Sunday in the first place doesn't really make much sense. However, bear with me for a minute here. If you're open to conspiracy theories, it could potentially make a little bit of sense. In that episode, we see Squidward go back in time and essentially invent jellyfishing. It's even brought up by SpongeBob and Patrick in the end that he's the one who invented it. This right here establishes that either A, SpongeBob and Patrick know he time traveled, B, the butterfly effect definitely exists in SpongeBob, or C, both of those things. Now, with that being said though, hear me out. What if this isn't just a case of the butterfly effect? What if when Squidward came back to the present day, he ended up in another universe? This would obviously play into the multiverse theory, but what if when he came back, he ended up in another timeline where the Krusty Krab is open 7 days a week instead of 6? I mean, odds are if that were the case, there would probably be other things different about this universe, but still, as someone who loves a good conspiracy theory, I can't help but start to wonder if maybe that is the case. In all reality though, this is just a good old-fashioned case of jumbled continuity. We'd see a similar thing happen in Season 3 as well, where it's referenced that the Krusty Krab is closed on Sundays. Then, in another episode that same season, they're all working there on a Sunday. With that being said though, maybe Squidward's time travel broke the multiverse and the individual universes started bleeding into one another. I mean, the SpongeBob SquarePants video game Cosmic Shake actually explores a similar topic with the main characters traveling across multiple different alternate realities, so I guess that logic isn't too far off from the general scope of SpongeBob lore. In conclusion, however, taking this episode for everything that it's worth, I really enjoy this one. It's a great episode, all things considered, and it's definitely one that stuck with me as a kid. It was funny, it had its creepy moments, and all in all, definitely was an iconic episode. With that being said, I'm gonna give this one a 9 out of 10, and we're gonna keep chugging along. The next episode we're going to check out is one that I truly love, and I'm so excited to jump into. We're talking about the episode called Something Smells. This episode starts out bright and early in the morning with SpongeBob waking up to the sound of his foghorn alarm clock. It blows him over to his giant calendar on the wall that we haven't seen since the Season 1 episode Boating School.
It's Sunday, Gary. Guess what's for breakfast? That's right. A sundae.
SpongeBob excitedly rushes on over to his freezer, but he opens it up to find that he's completely out of ice cream. Despite that, he happily decides that he's gonna have to use ketchup instead. He sprays nearly the whole bottle into his bowl and rushes over to pick out more ingredients.
Bananas, cherries, boring. Ah, here we go! Onions! Ready, Gary!
As the bowl becomes full with onions and ketchup, SpongeBob decides that it needs just one last ingredient: peanuts. However, when his peanut jar ends up being empty, he decides that he's gonna have to improvise. He remembers that he has a peanut plant growing in his bathroom windowsill, so he grabs the plant, pot, dirt, and all, and he drops it right into the bowl, thankful for the extra texture. He takes one bite, and next thing you know, he's finished the whole thing.
You know what they say, Gary? I'm easy like Sunday morning. Okay, let's see my to-do list. Go to work, go to work, go to work, go to work, go to work. No, that's not right. I need the one for Sunday.
The first thing on his to-do list is to say hi to every single person in Bikini Bottom. He walks across town, and as he says hi to people, they all have adverse reactions to his breath without SpongeBob realizing it. Such as the male fish, who breaks down like a set of nesting dolls, or the crossing guard, who's helping kids cross the street.
Mother of mercy!
Oh! Wow, a parade! Hi, parade! Hi, tuba player! Hi, drummer! Hi, guy with the cymbals! Hi, trumpeter! Hi, tambourine girl! Hi, timbali man! Hi, didgeridoo player!
As SpongeBob finishes up saying hi to every last member of the marching band, his breath hits them all like a ton of bricks, causing them to run away. Next thing you know, everyone in Bikini Bottom is gone, except for SpongeBob, who doesn't understand why everybody is running away from him.
And now, giant piles of bubble gum? Oh, what next?
Hi, SpongeBob.
Oh, hi, Patrick. I'm confused.
Yes, I am.
SpongeBob explains to Patrick that everyone is running away from him, as he demonstrates on a nearby building that runs away from him after coming into contact with his breath. Patrick, however, ends up not being affected, considering that he doesn't have a nose. He suggests that maybe it's because of how he's dressed, or because of how his voice sounds. But SpongeBob is quick to dismiss those, being confident in himself as far as those two things are concerned.
Maybe it's just because you're ugly.
Ugly? You gotta be kidding me.
Better try the reflection test.
Hi!
Ugly.
Oh, no!
SpongeBob runs around town in a panic, asking all the different residents if they think he's ugly. Based on their extreme responses, SpongeBob comes to the conclusion that Patrick has to be correct in his assumption. We cut to later on as Patrick approaches SpongeBob's house on a dark and stormy night, hoping to borrow some bath beads.
SpongeBob?
Go. Run away like all the others.
SpongeBob feels like nobody wants a friend as ugly as he is, but Patrick tries his best to reassure him. He decides that a story is just what SpongeBob needs to cheer him up, so Patrick picks him up and sets him down in a chair.
It's called the Ugly Barnacle. Once there was an ugly barnacle. He was so ugly that everyone died. The end.
That didn't help at all. How long have I been ugly, Patrick?
As long as I can remember. You poor, ugly thing, you.
SpongeBob cries his eyes out, and he starts spiraling in a panic, so Patrick gives him a good smack to bring him back down to earth.
Just do what I do when I have problems. Scream!
Patrick drags SpongeBob up to his roof and tells him that he just has to let it all out. However, SpongeBob is apprehensive. With some proper encouragement from Patrick, though, SpongeBob finally admits his truth.
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
Louder!
I'm ugly and I'm proud. I am ugly and I'm proud. I'm ugly and I'm proud.
Is that what he calls it?
That felt great.
After that, the two friends decide that they're gonna go see a movie together. They walk into the theater and take a seat as SpongeBob begins apologizing to everyone nearby for his horrible ugliness, hoping that it won't be a distraction from the movie.
Excuse me, sir. I hope my horrible ugliness won't be a distraction to you.
Not at all, boy!
After that, Patrick tries to reassure SpongeBob that guy is just being dramatic. However, he's saddened when he finds SpongeBob crying and saying that he isn't always as confident as he looks. He starts thinking that maybe he should just go home and hide.
What is wrong with you people? Afraid to look ugliness in the face? Well, here! Look at it! It's ugly, isn't it? You look at it!
Hello.
After everyone is forced to endure SpongeBob's horrible ugliness, every single fish in the movie theater runs away, leaving SpongeBob and Patrick there alone. They get excited about the fact that there's probably no line at the concession stand, but they're sad to find that even the employees have all ran away.
Oh, wait, Patrick. I just remembered. I've got some of my peanut onion sundae we can share.
That looks great! I gotta go to the restroom.
We cut to the bathroom where we see Patrick washing his hands next to one of the few fish in the theater who hasn't ran away yet. Patrick asks him if he can borrow some soap, but when this fish catches a whiff of Patrick's breath, he ends up running away in fear. After that, Patrick approaches some other fish asking if they want to hear a bathroom joke, but much like the first fish, they end up offended by Patrick's stench as they walk off.
Oh! I caught the ugly!
Patrick, is everything okay in here? What are you doing in there, Patrick?
Wouldn't you like to know?
And why's that bag on your head?
Why? Oh, no reason. Except you gave me the ugly!
Patrick starts to freak out a bit, saying that he can't go out looking like this. SpongeBob tries some positive affirmations, telling him that there's power in pride, just like Patrick taught him.
That may be fine for you, but I was one of the beautiful people. Now look at me. I'm almost as ugly as you.
Just then, SpongeBob starts to connect the dots as he realizes that Patrick isn't ugly. It's just that his breath stinks really bad. At this revelation, Patrick is completely relieved, and the two try to connect the dots further, as SpongeBob asks Patrick what he ate.
Oh, some roast beef, some chicken, a pizza.
No, I mean just this morning.
Some roast beef, some chicken, a pizza.
What else?
Well, I had some of your sundae.
Sunday.
SpongeBob pulls some of the leftover sundae out of his pocket as the two of them celebrate the fact that they're not ugly, they just smell really, really bad. As they run around celebrating, the stench of their noxious breath takes up the bathroom and ultimately ends up melting the entire theater into a pile of goo. The two friends then run off to celebrate.
Guess what, Squidward?
We stink!
Oh, yeah! Yes!
I win!
Okay, this episode is a little bit hard to dig into because there's just so much that I really enjoy about it, and it feels like I have a little too much to say about this episode. I mean, I could go on and on about what makes this such a memorable and iconic episode. In all reality, it's worth noting the message behind this episode is a positive one, all things considered. There's a few different ways you could look at it, and honestly, no matter which way you choose, the message portrayed here is kind of a loaded one. On the whole, this episode conveys a bit of a lesson in confidence in an interesting way. From the start, what set this chain of events in motion was SpongeBob realizing that everyone around him was treating him differently, and he just couldn't figure out why. SpongeBob is used to everyone around him usually reacting to him and his antics positively for the most part. In this episode, though, having everyone react adversely to him was a very abrupt change for him to take in. This right here highlights how we as people are generally kinda sensitive to how others perceive us. Sure, there are a good amount of people who truly couldn't care less about what others think about them, but it's a very true reality that a lot of people are heavily influenced by how everyone around them perceives and reacts to their actions, or even just their existence in general. However, we'd certainly have to point out that not a single person in this episode called SpongeBob ugly or even thought that he was ugly. Except for Patrick, and of course SpongeBob once Patrick had him convinced that he really was ugly. I feel like that's worth pointing out because it highlights how influential people close to us can be and how that ties directly into our sensitivity of others' perceptions of us. When all of these random fish were reacting negatively to him getting near them, SpongeBob couldn't for the life of him figure out why. However, it wasn't until Patrick pointed out that he could be ugly that SpongeBob decided to take that crumb of input and go running with it. All it took was Patrick putting that idea in his head for SpongeBob to take it as hard facts. And honestly, that's really sad. After SpongeBob was convinced that he was ugly, he goes around asking people if he's ugly, and their reactions to that question were literally identical to the people who had previously reacted to his smelly breath. None of them ever really answered the question though. Even without them answering verbally, however, that's all it took for SpongeBob to connect those dots and take Patrick's words as the correct assessment of the situation. More than anything though, this highlights the importance of building up your friends and loved ones instead of putting them down. Like, having strangers react to you in a specific way can be damaging enough in and of its own, but having someone who's close to you put ideas in your head of how others are perceiving you can be a very detrimental thing. Of course, by all means, it's one thing to have your friend, tell you that you need to put on deodorant. Things like that can be a reminder of something you may have forgotten. I personally have had days where I went to work and completely forgot to put on deodorant. By the time the afternoon rolled around and it was super hot outside in the summer, I'd started to smell bad and I didn't even realize it. However, one of my friends at work pointed it out to me, and thankfully I had backup deodorant in my locker at work, so I was able to remedy the situation. I personally was thankful for that because it saved me a lot of embarrassment. With that being said though, sometimes being pointed out things like that aren't all too bad. But there is a line. It's one thing to remind a friend that they forgot to put on their deodorant, and it's a completely whole other thing to straight up call them ugly. Your smell is something that's relatively within your control. Meanwhile, your looks, not so much. It was really sad to see how SpongeBob's confidence was completely destroyed by Patrick calling him ugly. SpongeBob literally went from confidently telling Patrick that he's gotta be kidding him at the start to full-blown apologizing to random people for his horrible ugliness towards the end. This right here was completely out of character for SpongeBob, but with that being said, it was Patrick's words combined with other people's actions that led to SpongeBob believing that he actually was ugly. Again, people's perceptions of themselves can be a very delicate and sensitive thing. It's important to help build your friends' confidence and perceptions of themselves, not completely destroy it. With that being said though, it's also worth noting that the ultimate outcome wasn't Patrick's intentions. He wasn't trying to hurt SpongeBob's feelings, and he wasn't trying to convince him that he was ugly. He was ultimately trying to help him find out the reason why everyone was treating him differently. But unfortunately, A, Patrick doesn't have a nose, so he wasn't able to figure out the real reason, and B, he's completely oblivious. So, of course, he didn't realize that what he was saying to SpongeBob could have been detrimental to his confidence. Now, with all of that being said, serious part of the analysis over, because, sure, the moral of the story is very important, but outside of that, there are a ton of aspects to this episode that are just pure gold. Taking it from the top, we have to talk about that title card and the music that comes along with it. It's just so perfect. It excellently encompasses everything about this episode. Their use of the green hues combined with the smear effects on the letters, then of course the music that just feels so ominous and foreboding. It's just the perfect title card for this episode, and I absolutely adore it. It really sets the mood for what's about to go down in a really effective way that makes you feel like it's building up to something disastrous. Continuing from there though, I have to take a sec to acknowledge how SpongeBob-y it is that SpongeBob eats an ice cream sundae for breakfast every single Sunday. Early on in the show, his character development was just so flawlessly executed. He'd started out as a very random happy-go-lucky character all throughout season 1, and that's something that they did such a great job of building upon in this season, even this early on in the season. His random SpongeBob-isms just really were developed and utilized in a very enjoyable way that did the perfect dance on the line between being annoyingly overdone and charmingly inviting. On top of that, though, we have to touch on his excitement for having a non-traditional Sunday. In this episode, we're led to believe that every Sunday he eats a completely normal ice cream sundae with your typical ingredients and toppings, but it just so happens that this Sunday he's all out of ice cream and some of his usual ingredients. At that realization, though, instead of being sad or upset about it, he's completely hyped to be able to concoct such a disgusting mishmash of clashing flavors. It almost felt like he did this intentionally. Like, the way he was so quick to jump to using something else instead of going to the store really made it feel like he purposefully didn't buy ice cream just so he could spend his Sunday morning doing this. And that right there is yet another SpongeBobism that just makes so much sense. It kind of brings me back to the April Fool's episode from season 1, where he pranks himself by pouring 100 drinks for him to drink because he has an extreme thirst. Like, this is obviously a very different context and situation, but in my opinion, it brings that same type of energy to the table without a doubt. On top of that, though, I really want to take a sec to recognize Gary for the very talented being that he's proved himself to be over the whole course of this show, but especially in these last few episodes. In the episode Your Shoes Untied, we saw that Gary not only wears shoes, but also he's capable of not only teaching others how to tie their shoes, but also playing records. Then on top of that, we learn in this episode that Gary has the ability to play the violin very well, might I add. His serenade literally had SpongeBob in tears as he was cutting those onions. Let's not forget also that Gary is an intellectual who's very well versed in literature, as evidenced by the dream sequence in season 1. We also see him doing spoken word poetry at the Krusty Krab talent show in season 1 as well. Overall, Gary has proven time and time again throughout the duration of this show that he's a very capable and sophisticated creature, despite not having arms and being only able to communicate through his meowing. In hindsight, I remember Gary always being one of my favorite characters, but watching back as an adult, I have a whole nother level of love for him. He's a really good boy, and he's a great character that the writers of the show utilize in very clever and interesting ways. I just appreciate it a ton. Moving on from there, though, I have to touch on the whole sequence of SpongeBob going to town. First of all, the fact that he pulls out his to-do list and it's just go to work over and over again always really cracks me up. Then of course, he has his Sunday to-do list that's minuscule in comparison to his normal to-do list. And of course, pretty much the only thing on his Sunday to-do list is to just say hi to every single person in Bikini Bottom. When he goes out to do that, though, the reactions of the people in town are just so incredibly funny. I got a massive kick out of the crossing guard gag. The way that they set it up to seem like SpongeBob was about to watch a horrific car accident was just so morbidly hilarious. Then, of course, the revelation that it's a marching band playing in a parade was just the icing on the cake. Not to mention the fact that this is just the most unconventional marching band of all time. Like, what marching band has a didgeridoo player? It was just so incredibly random, and I love it. It felt really cleverly done. I do have to point out, though, that it always confused me as a kid hearing what SpongeBob said at the end.
And hello, Dolly!
I always thought he was saying hello Dottie, but apparently he's saying hello Dolly, which some people think could be a reference to a musical called Hello Dolly. But if I'm being honest, even with that explained, I still don't get why they made that reference. But hey, there's only a few select musicals that I'm really into, so I'm not surprised that this one went over my head. From there though, the reactions of the fish just keep getting more extreme. We see these two fish who, just at the smell of SpongeBob's breath, decide to grab some hooks from above and have themselves caught by fishermen. This right here came with so many morbid implications when you keep the hooks episode in mind. Like, they already established that the fish in Bikini Bottom correlate the hooks with pretty much the end of life. I mean, Mr. Krabs warned SpongeBob and Patrick about the hooks and what they lead to, so with that being said, we've developed an understanding that it's not really a secret that the hooks are to be feared. It's basically being implied that these fish are offing themselves after smelling SpongeBob's breath. Then, of course, we see SpongeBob land on this guy's windshield, causing his breath to get into the guy's eyes. Then, from there, he doesn't even crash. He just kind of spins out and ends up in the middle of the road when his car straight up explodes, leaving no trace of him inside. Not to mention the part where SpongeBob's own reflection literally takes a hammer to the mirror after smelling his breath. All in all, there were a surprising amount of gags in this episode that lead to or infer death in some way, shape, or form. Going in a bit of a different direction though, another thing that I truly loved about this episode is the part where SpongeBob walks away from all of these people confused, just to find even more confusion when he sees a giant pile of bubblegum sitting on a bench. Which we end up learning is just Patrick, who for some reason can now suck his limbs into his torso to make himself look like a pink blob. I feel like the small random gags like this are definitely a huge part of what makes this episode really just so enjoyable for me. Like, for example, the part where Patrick goes to SpongeBob's house late at night to find him sitting at his organ playing it in a mask and a cape like he's in the Phantom of the Opera or something like that, only for him to turn around to reveal that the mask he's hiding behind is just a pair of Groucho Marx glasses. It really is the little things like that which really make early SpongeBob shine in such a special and enjoyable way. Some of it feels random for the sake of random, but a good majority of these gags have some deeper meaning to them, and that's something that I get so much joy out of. Like that scene where SpongeBob and Patrick are on top of SpongeBob's house, and this happens.
You're never gonna feel better till you get this thing off your chest.
I know, Patrick.
It's the jokes like this one that really get me the most. Now, of course, I can't talk about this episode and not talk about the ugly barnacle. Like, in my mind, this scene is just so iconically hilarious, and I love it so much. The way Patrick pretty much babies SpongeBob at this point, talking to him like he's a little kid. Then, of course, SpongeBob is just eating it up, as seen by the look on his face when he's under the impression that Patrick is actually telling a story that will help his situation. And of course, the substance of the story basically telling SpongeBob that everyone's going to die because of how ugly he is. Like, Patrick telling him this story to cheer him up was just so counterproductive to his ultimate goal, and it really just further cements our understanding of how oblivious that Patrick is, kind of at all times. As oblivious as he is, though, he's definitely a character that had quite an impression on us as viewers. There are multiple episodes in this season where Patrick has just so many relatable moments, but this one right here is one that got so burned into my brain that it's not even funny.
Just do what I do when I have problems. Scream!
I mean, I get it. Patrick's right. Sometimes you just gotta let it all out and give the world a big scream, I guess. The ending of this episode is one that I found a lot of appreciation for over the years, though. It made me happy to see SpongeBob come to the realization that he wasn't... It made me so happy to see SpongeBob coming to the realization that he wasn't ugly and that his breath was just really gnarly after eating his peanut onion sundae. Touching on the end though, I definitely have to talk about how the overall atmosphere of the movie theater really is something that I have just a ton of appreciation for. Over the many videos that I've made about SpongeBob, nearly every time I find myself just having so much love for the Polynesian-inspired art that's utilized throughout the show, and of course, as you've already seen, this video is no exception to that. The vibe of this movie theater really capitalizes on that just so well. The art style of the walls with the tikis on them, the bathroom, and heck, even the lobby. It just all feels so true to that OG SpongeBob vibe, and I have a lot of admiration for that. In my opinion, they completely knocked it out of the park with the design of the movie theater. As far as the sequence that happens at the theater goes though, I absolutely love the part where SpongeBob is apologizing to everyone around him, hoping that he won't be a distraction from the movie. The thing I loved the most though was this reaction specifically.
I hope my horrible ugliness won't be a distraction to you.
Not at all, boy!
Like, the way that they drew this guy's face while he's making that grossed out noise always made me crack up as a kid. Then, of course, we have the part where they're out near the concession stand and there aren't any employees there to help them. SpongeBob, surprisingly, still has a portion of his peanut onion sundae left over that he shares with Patrick, and the way that Patrick looks at it and it burns his eyebrows off was just way too funny. On top of that, he eats it, and almost immediately his body's making the sounds of an old engine backfiring, and within seconds, it's destroyed his insides as he heads straight for the bathroom. As the kid who got a lot of joy out of toilet humor, this scene was always one to just crack me up. I mean, as far as the whole episode goes, it was comedy gold from start to finish. I really enjoyed this one all in all, and I'd say that it holds up just as good, if not better than it did when I was a kid. I'm gonna go ahead and give this one the 10 out of 10 that it deserves, and we're gonna move right ahead. Next up, we're going to check out an episode that I enjoy a ton, even though it always kind of has given me mixed feelings. It's one that almost feels like it belongs in Season 1, but with that being said, it really has that Season 2 kind of vibe that makes it fit in with the rest of this season very well. We're checking out the episode called Bossy Boots. This episode starts out during the day at the Krusty Krab, with Squidward behind the register and SpongeBob on the grill as Mr. Krabs stands nearby and obnoxiously uses a megaphone to call them to his office for an important announcement.
Hooray! The new spatulas are here!
Sit down, boy. There's no new spatulas.
How disappointing.
You men know me, Daughter Pearl. She's growing up fast. It seems like it was just yesterday I was teaching her how to preach. Me mammalian angel. Anyway, so she's gonna be working here during her summer vacation.
Mr. Krabs continues to explain that Pearl has a ton of fresh new ideas for the Krusty Krab, but before he can get too far into detail, we hear her arriving and calling for her dad. As Mr. Krabs runs off to greet her, Squidward pulls SpongeBob aside and explains that he thinks this is gonna be terrible for them. Squid says that this means that some bratty teenagers are going to be coming in here and telling them what to do. Citing their seniority as the reason why they don't deserve that, Squidward proposes that they work together to protect their positions. Though SpongeBob agrees with him, you can tell more or less that it's kind of in one ear and out the other for him.
Say hello to me, Pearl.
Hello, Pole.
Hi, guys.
It makes me jolly as a Roger to finally have you aboard the family business.
Great, Dad, because I have so many new ideas.
I can smell the money already. I'll be in my office if you need me.
As Mr. Krabs walks off, SpongeBob asks Pearl what's in the box that she's holding. She teases him, saying that it's a surprise, and SpongeBob is super excited to see what it is. She tells him to close his eyes as she puts the box over him and reveals the brand new Krusty Crew uniform that she designed herself.
Okay, this is it, SpongeBob. Now tell her how you really feel about that uniform.
Okay, Squidward. Pearl, this is the greatest uniform ever!
fish paste.
Oh, SpongeBob, you look so adorable. I could just eat you up.
Sorry, Pearl, this item's not on the menu.
Everyone but Squidward is stoked about the new uniforms, even Mr. Krabs. Squidward refuses to wear the new outfit, but when Mr. Krabs basically threatens to fire him, he changes his mind rather begrudgingly.
Rage, fury, irritation, humiliation.
Squidward is such a barnacle.
A stick in the sand.
But not you, SpongeBob. You are full of style.
Me? Really?
Totally, SB. You ooze fashion.
Pearl ends up enlisting SpongeBob to help her spice up the Krusty Krab a bit and implement some new designs that'll bring a more modern feel to this really old and dated restaurant. We then cut to a little while later where we see Pearl asking SpongeBob and Squidward about what they think about her options for a new name for the Krusty Krab to go along with its new look. Squidward argues, saying that the terrible name fits the fact that this is a terrible place, so it should be left alone.
Right, SpongeBob?
I got it! How about the chaotic crab?
How about the kissy crab?
The king crab?
The candy crab.
The cool crab? Or the cowboy crab? The curly crab? The creepy crab? The killer crab?
No.
You're right, too scary.
By the end of it, the two of them end up finally agreeing on a name together. The Cuddly Crab. Squidward is just absolutely angered to the point of flames over all of these changes. He begins shaking the brand new sign out of anger, and this happens.
It's a shame old man Crab sold the Krusty Krab.
That's a darn shame. Hey, lady, do you know where we can get something to eat around here?
That's it! I quit!
After that, we get a look at the newly renovated Krusty Krab, where a bunch of young teenagers are dancing around and talking about how thankful they are to finally have a place for teens to just hang out. Nearby, SpongeBob is telling Pearl about how much of a genius she is for making all of these fantastic changes. He then heads back on into the kitchen to prepare some food for the teens.
The customers may be hot, but my grill is hotter.
SpongeBob, order up.
2 salads. Never heard of it. I gotta stay hip. I don't want to end up like silly old Squidward. But what in the name of Davy Jones's locker is a salad?
Out on the floor, SpongeBob brings Pearl 2 Krabby Patties, calling them salads. But Pearl tells him to take it back, saying that he needs to take away the bun, the patty, and the condiments.
No buns. That's hip. No patties. Happening. Oh yeah, that's definitely the coolest meal I ever saw.
This is so
It's
cool.
really nice to be
2
sorry.
salads.
SpongeBob walks into the kitchen, saying that his heart just can't stand tearing apart another Krabby Patty. But just then, his heart is straight up ripped from his chest when he sees that his grill is missing. Pearl explains to him that he needs to get with the times and that fried foods are out.
Check out this new menu I came up with.
Salad and tea. But where are the Krabby Patties?
Oh, silly, those aren't hip. Oh, you won't be needing that thing anymore. I've got something more fun for you to do anyway.
Hey, buddy, you need a ride? I was just on my way to the big doofus convention.
At this point, SpongeBob finally gets fed up. He says that he's done being humiliated and that he's gonna go tell Mr. Krabs that things are now changing for the worse. After struggling with his oversized costume for a little while, he makes his way inside and walks right into Mr. Krabs' newly renovated office. SpongeBob takes a seat, and he struggles to talk to Mr. Krabs due to not only his nerves, but also because Mr. Krabs won't let him get a word in edgewise because he's so busy emphasizing the cost of all the amazing things that Pearl has made him buy for the Cuddly Crab.
Mr. Krabs, Pearl is ruining the Krusty Krab.
What? Why, Pearlie's saving the Krusty Krab. I mean, The cuddly crab. How could we have ever survived without these $35 heart lights? How could we go on without a sea fern on every last table? It's hip, it's coral, it's losing money!
Mr. Krabs cries his eyes out, finally admitting that SpongeBob is right. He says that Pearl is bleeding him dry of his money with all of these awful changes. However, he has no idea how to tell her that it's just not working out. SpongeBob tries to offer him some reassurance, saying that there has to be another way, which gives him an idea.
That's it, boy!
What's it?
You could fire her. It's okay if she hates you.
That's not what I said, sir.
Great then, it's all settled. You fire Pearly, I'll hide in the office.
Totally rude, SpongeBob.
SpongeBob asks Pearl if he can see her in the kitchen for a sec. He's super nervous, feeling like he has no idea how to break it to her. But as soon as he walks through the door of the kitchen, he's met with immediate surprise as Pearl starts to cry her eyes out. She confides in SpongeBob, saying that nothing that she's doing is working. He provides her some comfort, saying that everything's working perfectly, as evidenced by all the hip young people eating salads.
No, don't you get it? I've been trying to get fired. I was only pretending to like this place to please Daddy. This job is cutting majorly into my social life. Oh, SpongeBob, what should I do?
SpongeBob sits back for a sec, contemplating the absolute miracle of a solution that was just dropped into his lap. He pitches the idea to Pearl that he could just pretend to fire her and take the heat from Mr. Krabs later. She thanks him with a massive bear hug, and next thing you know, we see them outside of Mr. Krabs' office, ready to put on an Oscar-worthy performance.
Pearl, I need to have a word with you.
Oh no! I don't know if I can bear to listen.
It's not that you haven't done a good job around here, it's just that...
Why does it have to be this way? It's for the best.
Well, we feel it might be in everybody's best interest if...
I can't let him do this! Huh? Get on with it, SpongeBob!
Pearl, you're fired.
Pearl thanks SpongeBob with a kiss on the head as she runs out of the restaurant and right into her friend's boat, excitedly headed for the mall. Meanwhile, back in the restaurant, SpongeBob goes into Mr. Krabs' office and completely loses it when he finds Mr. Krabs on the ground unconscious. He breaks the glass of an emergency case where an AED should probably be located, but instead there's a dollar bill in there that he waves under Mr. Krabs' nose to bring him back to consciousness. When he comes back to, he begins to weep about having wronged his own flesh and blood. However, he's brought to peace when SpongeBob tells him that she'd actually seemed kind of happy because she's off to bigger and better things.
That's me, girl. Tough as nails, just like her old man. But how am I gonna get my money back for all this stuff?
Isn't this great, Gary? And it only cost me 1 year's salary.
So looking back on this episode, I really want to start by taking things just right from the tip top and touch on that title card. Considering you've heard me say it a million times, you already know I love that art style, but specifically as it pertains to this title card, I love the way that they tied in the use of flowers, with lots of different pinks and blues and purples. Then, of course, green is my favorite color, so I really dig their use of green for the bamboo framing around everything here. What really brings it together perfectly, though, is, of course, I'm sure you can guess, the music that accompanies it. The interesting thing is that the music doesn't necessarily reflect the overall theme of the episode very well, in my opinion, but it does match this title card just perfectly. This music, for me personally, really sparks a lot of joy. I absolutely love this song, and all the times that I remember hearing it being used in this show were very happy and positive times. It really brings me happy feelings of warmth and almost an odd feeling of accomplishment. Like, this isn't the same song, but it kinda gives a similar feeling to the end of the episode Rock Bottom, when SpongeBob finally makes it home after ascending from the mysterious and foreign depths of Rock Bottom with the help from one of the locals and his Glove World balloon. In all reality though, this song itself is one that would be featured in so many iconic episodes from season 1. We're talking pizza delivery, tea at the Tree Dome, ripped pants, and quite a few more actually. It's just a classic SpongeBob tune, and I guess it kind of reminds me of a simpler time in my life that I look back on very fondly. Moving on from there, I have so much love for that moment when Mr. Krabs sits down Squidward and SpongeBob saying that he has an important announcement for them, only for SpongeBob to spring right back up in uncontrollable excitement, thinking that he's gonna tell them that the new spatulas are here. I remember the first time that I watched this episode, that gag had 6-year-old me just dying laughing. Still to this day, I just find it so funny. I adore it so much though, because this right here shows such a beautiful mix of SpongeBob's childlike innocence combined with his general happy-go-lucky nature. I absolutely love it, and I wish that I could just bottle up that positive energy and save it for later. Seeing SpongeBob get so excited over the idea of new spatulas made me get excited as a viewer, and honestly, growing up, it was scenes like this that always made me try to mirror SpongeBob's enthusiasm. Watching this and seeing how SpongeBob was in scenes like this one made me feel like that level of enthusiasm was not only hilarious, but it also spreads that joy to others as well. As a kid, it made me want to spread enthusiasm and positivity everywhere that I went as well, just like SpongeBob did. The earlier seasons always made me so happy for that reason. I swear, no matter what I was going through as a kid, these early episodes of SpongeBob always left me feeling chipper and hopeful, even ones like this that, in all reality, weren't the most positive. I mean, this episode is about Pearl ruining the Krusty Krab on purpose to get fired. Meanwhile, Mr. Krabs struggles with how to fire her, so he just kind of prolongs the inevitable. Sure, it was funny, entertaining, and a great episode, but the premise wasn't the most positive overall, and I'm sure we can all agree on that. Regardless of that though, this episode still managed to invoke those happy and joyous feelings. I definitely have to take just a second to talk about that iconic Cuddly Crab uniform that Pearl designed herself. If I'm being honest, it certainly does not fit the rustic Krusty Krab vibe. However, for that new soft Cuddly Crab look, it's perfect, and I'm not gonna lie, I kinda like it. After all these years, I feel like it's just always been burned into all of our brains to the point where when you see that pattern anywhere, you immediately know what it is. It's such a flagship, iconic part of this episode, and I just have to take a sec to give it some praise. I also want to bring up how much I loved that scene where Pearl is trying to pick a new name for the Krusty Krab. This scene is just side-splittingly hilarious, and definitely a memorable one without a doubt. I always thought SpongeBob's name ideas were the funniest. My favorite of the bunch is kind of hard to pick. It might just be the Cool Crab, or possibly the Killer Crab. That one was pretty good. This is the point of the show where that really random humor that I was talking about earlier kinda started to come into play full force, but when they first implemented it, it wasn't overbearing or down your throat too much, and it always felt like it was randomness with a purpose, instead of, like we touched on briefly earlier, randomness for the sake of randomness that would plague the later seasons of the show. In instances like this one, with SpongeBob bringing up the King Crab, the Chaotic Crab, or the Curly Crab as name ideas, the randomness of those names was just really funny. In general, the gags in this episode were just hilarious through and through. I always would find myself straight up cackling during that scene where Squidward is outside of the Cuddly Crab angrily shaking their brand new sign, and those boomer fish roll up in their boat and call him a lady.
Hey, lady! Do you know where we can get something to eat around here?
That's it! I quit!
This right here literally destroys me every time I watch it, and even recording this right now, I'm trying so hard not to think too hard about that scene because it's just too funny to me. Like, it's not even the fact that they misidentified Squidward that's funny, it's more his reaction to it that's so hilarious to me. This ends up being the straw that breaks the camel's back, and the dude straight up ends up getting a ticket over it because he full-blown strips nude in the streets of Bikini Bottom. Now, moving along, again, kind of tackling this episode in order of events, I definitely wanted to talk about the part where SpongeBob makes this comment.
The customers may be hot, but my grill is hotter.
Now, is it just me, or was that kinda weird? Like, I totally recognize that SpongeBob isn't exactly threatening or a creep, and he's more or less just trying to be cool and fit in. But when you keep in mind that he's talking about literal teenagers, that's kind of a foot in your mouth statement if you know what I mean. In this same moment though, we see Pearl reveal her new menu to SpongeBob, and this menu is just straight up garbage. It's literally salad and tea, and that's it. I mean, I get going for more of a simplistic menu, but with that being said, at this point, is it even a restaurant anymore? It's more like a cafe for teens to hang out than a place for people to sit down for an actual meal. On top of that though, how dumb is it that Pearl would jump through as many hoops as to pretty much completely overhaul this restaurant Gordon Ramsay style, but not train SpongeBob on the new menu that he's expected to cook? I mean, she's just setting him up for failure, more or less, if you look at it that way. It gets to the point where this poor former fry cook is reduced to standing outside in a costume because his job was pretty much eliminated in this renovation, all at the hands of Pearl, who little does everybody know is actually trying to sink this ship purposefully. Like, I can't help but wonder how she thought this place would pass a health inspection. She'd straight up replaced the floors with shag carpet in a restaurant. That would be completely impossible to keep clean and would be just a nightmare for practical purposes. I will admit though, not all of Pearl's changes were awful, however. Like the exterior of the restaurant with the pink wood, the heart banners, and the rainbow on the glass. It's actually kinda sick. Then like when you get inside and you see what she did with the cash register area, it's pretty sweet if you ask me. Strictly aesthetically speaking, some of this is really cool. Not really fitting or practical for a restaurant, but still, stylistically, I appreciate what she was going for. Continuing on from there though, I got a kick out of the part where we see SpongeBob outside dressed up in the crab costume. This dude rolls up and he says,
"Hey buddy, you need a ride? I was just on my way to the big doofus convention."
The irony in that statement is just hilarious to me. I always thought that it was pretty silly that this guy pretty much burned himself in trying to burn SpongeBob. Like, him saying what he said implies that he himself is also a big doofus who's headed to that convention. Continuing from there though, I honestly have to admit that I could relate to Mr. Krabs a bit during that scene where he's crying his eyes out at the idea of having to tell his daughter that her new ideas aren't working at all. I've never really been in that kind of situation with my daughter per se, but having to tell anyone that you love and care about that their ideas aren't benefiting anyone the way that they hoped they would is a really hard thing to have to do. It breaks his heart because he doesn't want to make Pearl feel like she isn't doing a good job. Meanwhile, little does he know, she just wants to be fired already because she didn't even want to be here in the first place. In all reality, if we take a step back and analyze the situation, you don't have to zoom out too far to realize that it's like neither of them wants to be the honest person and step up to the plate in this situation. If anyone, as the business owner and the adult in this situation, it's up to Mr. Krabs to step up to the plate and be the person that he needs to be here. Yet, instead, he hides and lets SpongeBob be his scapegoat here. This really just kind of shows us how spineless of a father that Mr. Krabs is. I will admit though, it is kind of strange because sometimes he refuses to even give Pearl more than $1 and is really strict with her. Yet in this one, he's willing to spend hundreds of dollars on all of this random junk and seems like he's a big old softy who's afraid to tell her no about spending his money. I don't know, it just kind of gives mixed signals just to as what kind of parent he is, if you catch my drift. I'm not sure if he's strict or a big old softy. I do know, however, that some of the stuff that Pearl had purchased was just ridiculous. The $20 seahorse paintings and $40 beanbag chair were one thing, but what really sent me was the stress buddy that Mr. Krabs bought for a whopping 5 payments of $10. This thing right here is so obnoxiously overpriced that it full-blown has the exact opposite of its intended effect for Mr. Krabs. Now, about the point where SpongeBob sits Pearl down at Mr. Krabs' bidding to fire her, I realized just how funny all of this really is when you take it into context. All of this happened over the course of just one day. Actually, less than an entire business day, really, is all it took for them to determine that Pearl being there was more of a hindrance than anything. On top of that, I also found it silly how in less than one day, she's saying that this is taking a huge toll on her social life and she wants to leave. I found it comical just how fast all of this occurred. In the course of that one day, Pearl got hired, the restaurant and its crew got an entire makeover, Squidward quit his job and got a ticket, Mr. Krabs' reputation was tarnished, and finally, Pearl got fired. Again, all of this within the same day. Another thing that this episode highlights very well, though, is just how much Mr. Krabs walks all over SpongeBob consistently. Prime example, the point where SpongeBob is trying to comfort a crying Mr. Krabs, telling him that there has to be another way other than firing Pearl. Mr. Krabs responds by essentially assuming that this means SpongeBob is willing to fire Pearl for him. We even see SpongeBob try to stand up for himself, saying that's not what he said, but Mr. Krabs just kind of ignores him, railroading him out of his office to fire Pearl on his behalf. It all just felt very manipulative. It was kind of like he was in his office, giving SpongeBob crocodile tears, waiting for SpongeBob to offer to fire Pearl for him. Then, as soon as SpongeBob shows even a bit of empathy, Mr. Krabs completely steamrolls him into doing what he wants him to do. That is definitely one thing that I don't really appreciate about Mr. Krabs. I would have enjoyed it if the writers of the show had portrayed Mr. Krabs playing a more fatherly role to SpongeBob, kind of looking out for his best interest instead of being manipulative and ripping him off time and time again. But with that being said, it makes sense. Mr. Krabs is the greediest creature in Bikini Bottom, and it shows. On the note of Mr. Krabs' greed, I laugh so hard every time I see the gag in this episode where SpongeBob finds Mr. Krabs unconscious, so he breaks the AED case in Mr. Krabs' office, but instead of finding anything even remotely first aid related inside, he finds a dollar bill that he uses almost as if it were smelling salts to bring Mr. Krabs back to consciousness. This right here is even more of that clever early SpongeBob humor that we all know and love. It's the small things like this that really just up the hilarity of these earlier episodes in such a valuable and worthwhile way. As far as the end of this episode goes, I always appreciated seeing SpongeBob in his house, just having a blast with all of the stuff that Pearl bought for the Krusty Krab. However, I have to take a sec to recognize that he actually got a really good deal on all of this. We hear SpongeBob tell Gary that it only costed him 1 year of his salary for all of that stuff. Now, when we factor in how much Mr. Krabs pays SpongeBob, it's genuinely a good bargain, I'm assuming. I say I'm assuming because the topic of how much money SpongeBob is paid is actually a pretty gray area of a topic. We've seen examples of SpongeBob getting paid pennies or even having to pay Mr. Krabs for working at the Krusty Krab. It's actually a topic that some people have taken pretty deeply into consideration. I remember seeing a meme on Reddit where someone said, I did the math, and if the Krusty Krab closes at 6 and SpongeBob always arrives at work at 3 a.m. to count the sesame seeds, and if he comes in every day except Sunday and works at a rate of $8.50 an hour with a paycheck every 2 weeks, SpongeBob makes $1,326 every paycheck, which seems feasible given the Krusty Krab's revenue. So that explains why SpongeBob owns his house still, has a massive library, and all sorts of extremities. Like, damn, no wonder he can keep affording boating school. Now, you all know that I live for the in-depth analysis of SpongeBob just as much, if not more than the next guy, but this meme, I have to point out, is definitely way off base. First of all, the Krusty Krab doesn't always close at 6 p.m. There are certain days, at least Tuesday I know of for sure, when it's open till 8 p.m. On top of that, it's not always closed on Sundays. Like we talked about earlier, in some episodes that's the case, but not in others. On top of that though, we all know good and well without a doubt that Mr. Krabs does not pay SpongeBob $8.50 an hour. I have absolutely no clue where that number came from, but I guarantee that it is substantially lower than that. Mr. Krabs himself even admitted that he happily pays his employees less than minimum wage, which, at a federal level, at least here in the United States, is only $7.25 an hour. Furthermore though, this doesn't take into account the fact that SpongeBob's income is likely taxed as well, which is a whole different conversation. At the end of the day, you get my point. This meme is highly off base. As far as this episode itself goes though, I thoroughly enjoy this one. I find it a little bit odd that in the beginning we see Mr. Krabs tell SpongeBob and Squidward to say hello to Pearl almost as if he was introducing them for the first time, even though we know that both Squidward and SpongeBob have interacted with her personally. But that aside, this episode is still fantastic from start to finish, all things considered. I'm gonna go ahead and give this one a confident 9 out of 10, and with that being said, let's move right along to the next one. Next up, we're gonna check out an episode that I remember very well, and if I recall correctly, this one always drove me nuts as a kid a little bit, but nevertheless, it's still a very iconic episode from season 2. We're checking out none other than Big Pink Loser. This episode starts out on a beautiful day in Bikini Bottom, where we're treated to the classic French narrator voice setting the scene perfectly.
Welcome to Bikini Bottom, where can be found some of the finest specimens of undersea life. Well, you know.
Patrick lets out a big yawn, and when he does, the male fish walks by and sticks a package in his open mouth. Patrick opens it up, and he's through the roof excited to find that he's seemingly been given an award.
Look, Rock! I got an award! Jellyfish! I got an award! Island! I got an award! I gotta show SpongeBob!
Over at SpongeBob's house, we see him building a massive Gary out of cards when Patrick runs right through his front door without knocking and destroys it. In an outburst of excitement, he tells SpongeBob that he finally got an award. SpongeBob asks him what it's for, and Patrick tells him to see for himself. SpongeBob looks and is surprised to see that what Patrick is holding is actually a trophy for outstanding achievement in achievement that's actually meant for SpongeBob himself.
Patrick, I think the award is for me. You must have got it by mistake.
But it's shiny!
Yeah, but you know what else is shiny?
Ice cream!
Exactly!
I can find it! Is it in here?
No, don't! That's mine! Award closet.
I want an award!
Patrick cries his eyes out and throws himself on the ground as SpongeBob tries to reassure him that he is gonna get an award someday. Despite SpongeBob's reassurance, however, Patrick argues, saying that he's never gonna get an award because he's never done anything.
But you're Patrick Star. You can do anything you want.
That's easy for you to say. You're SpongeBob.
From there, SpongeBob decides that he's gonna help Patrick get an award, and they're gonna start by getting him a job at the Krusty Krab because SpongeBob does stuff at work all the time. We cut on over to the Krusty Krab, where we see Patrick starting his first day.
It was sure nice of Mr. Krabs to give me a job.
And at $50 an hour, too. When I started working here, I had to pay Mr. Krabs $100 an hour. Hey, Squidward, guess who just got a job?
Guess who just quit?
Do I get my award yet?
You have to work for it, remember?
Tartar sauce.
After that, we see SpongeBob finishing up an order in the kitchen, but when he calls Patrick to serve it to the customer, Patrick ravenously devours the entire meal within a matter of seconds.
Do I get my award now?
No, you have to take the tray to the customer.
Okay.
Almost. Try again, and this time make sure the food gets to the table.
Like that?
Nope.
Particles!
After that doesn't work, SpongeBob decides to put him in charge of answering the phone when anyone calls, which, yet again, is just an absolute failure.
Is this the Krusty Krab?
No, this is Patrick.
Is this the Krusty Krab?
No! This is Patrick! I'm not a Krusty Krab.
Patrick, that's the name of the restaurant.
Feeling defeated, Patrick hangs his head low, but SpongeBob continues to believe in him as he tasks him with sweeping the floor. We then hear the sound of an ear-splitting screech as Patrick stands there sweeping the floor with the handle of the broom instead of the bristles. Meanwhile, we see a delivery fish arrive with an entire shipment of trophies addressed to SpongeBob. This right here sends Patrick over the edge and makes him start to lose his mind as he hits the ground with his broom, causing a scene in front of all the customers. SpongeBob pulls him aside and brings him to the kitchen, deciding that he's going to give him the most simple task that he could possibly think of: opening a jar.
First, get a jar. Patrick, that's a pickle.
Yes.
You need a jar. No. 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 Try this.
SpongeBob tries his best to instruct Patrick through getting the lid off of the jar, but Patrick, being terrible at following instructions, can't seem to find the lid.
Cold. Warmer. 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 You're hot. You're on fire.
Oh, it burns!
Okay, wait. Do exactly as I do. Exactly as I do.
Exactly as you do. Oh no, I broke it!
No, Patrick, you did it!
I did?
The two celebrate as confetti and balloons fall from the sky. At the end of the day, we see a beautiful sunset in the background as Patrick and SpongeBob leave the Krusty Krab together in pure excitement. Patrick feels so good about his amazing feat of opening a jar, and as they walk down the street, SpongeBob reassures him that if he copies exactly what he does, then he'll get an award in no time. The next morning, we see SpongeBob wake up at the crack of dawn and leave for work when this happens.
Good morning, SpongeBob.
Wow, it's amazing how a simple change of clothes can make a guy look just like me.
Yep, if I'm gonna be an award winner, I've gotta dress like one.
That's creepy, but flattering. I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready.
We see the workday continue as Patrick proceeds to follow every step that SpongeBob takes. However, he messes things up along the way, overwatering the floor when he mops and causing a bunch of dishes to be destroyed in the process. Back in the kitchen, we see SpongeBob begin to catch on to Patrick's shenanigans.
Oh!
Aha! You're copying me!
Yes.
Why are you doing that?
So I can win an award like you.
Well, it's annoying, so stop it!
Stop.
We see things progress to the point where SpongeBob isn't even safe inside of his own mind. And he ends up getting fed up as he sprints out of the Krusty Krab with Patrick in hot pursuit. Patrick says that he's prepared to keep this up until he has as many awards as SpongeBob does.
Not much fun being me now, huh, Patrick?
Are you kidding? I used to do this way before I started copying you.
SpongeBob runs into his house to hide, saying that he wishes that he could just have the old Patrick back, sad about the fact that Patrick feels like his true self isn't good enough. This thought gives SpongeBob an idea, and next thing you know, we see him poke his nose in and walk out of his house dressed like Patrick, hoping that now Patrick will start acting like himself again.
What's so great about being a big pink loser? Exactly. I was never closer to an award than the minute I started copying you.
But Patrick...
Patrick's not here!
Just then, the two of them are interrupted by yet another perfectly timed trophy delivery. SpongeBob stands there with the package shoved into his mouth as Patrick stands by angrily, wondering what SpongeBob got a trophy for this time. SpongeBob rips open the box and finds a trophy inside for doing absolutely nothing longer than anyone else. However, he's surprised to find that the trophy is this time addressed to Patrick.
So, what are you gonna do now?
I'm gonna go protect my title!
So you thought I was kidding, huh? No, in Bikini Bottom, excellence can be found even under a rock.
Now, this one right here is another one of those iconic early episodes that, though it did drive me nuts a bit as a kid, I still enjoyed it a ton. The part that drove me nuts, though, was rather me-specific, and with that being set aside, this is still a phenomenal episode with a ton of very iconic moments that would go down in not only cartoon history, but meme culture as well. From start to finish, this one has just so much value in my eyes. First of all, the beginning of this episode sets the scene so perfectly. I always loved the episodes that begin with the soothing narration of none other than Tom Kenny himself doing a French accent. It's just so oddly fitting for the overall vibe and feel of this show. It almost doesn't make sense because the show gives off a very relaxed, beach life, kind of rustic Hawaiian vibe with all of the floral patterns and tikis featured throughout many of the show's art. Meanwhile, the narrator, for some reason, sounds French. It's another one of those things that I feel like was done for the sake of random humor and zany antics, but on that note though, it oddly enough fits the overall vibe and feel of the show incredibly well. As this episode begins, I just find myself washed over with positive feelings and happiness. The narrator's calm voice bleeds over into a chill day where we see Patrick passed out up against his rock, and as a cohesive piece of media, this just flows so perfectly, and it leaves us as viewers really soaking in the moment. It's honestly really impressive though, because they're able to set this scene perfectly and invoke these kinds of deep feelings in all of like 13 seconds. This right here is another thing that really highlights a big characteristic of this show, and that would be its instantaneous 0 to 10 nature. Exactly like we saw in this intro sequence, we went from a chill, sleepy vibe to extreme excitement in a matter of seconds. Not only did the pace of the show itself have the same kind of rapid fluctuation and energy bursts, but SpongeBob himself, of course, practically embodies this. He's constantly going from 0 to 10, be it emotionally or in excitement in general. Meanwhile, in this intro, it's Patrick we see accelerate so quickly. He goes from sleeping against his rock to pure ecstasy over the award that he thought he was given. This level of excitement is just so pure and happy, especially coming from a character like Patrick. I always loved the iconic beginning scene where Patrick, in his excitement, ends up showing the jellyfish his award and they attack him. Then he proceeds to show the island from the intro sequence his award, and as he floats in midair, he starts to choke from the lack of water. This whole sequence right here just really emphasizes everything that makes season 2 of SpongeBob so great. This show really took on an interesting change of pace as time went on, and over the first few seasons, it really did mature very well. Comparing the pace and gags of Season 1 to that of Season 2 is just really such an interesting comparison to make because they're just so extremely different, yet incredibly similar at the same time, if that makes any sense. Like, for example, that scene where we first see SpongeBob in this episode. He's in his living room, spending his day off building a giant effigy of Gary out of playing cards. this right here just feels so random and out of pocket that it just doesn't feel like a gag that we would have seen in season 1. That doesn't mean it's a bad gag, it just feels a little too random. However, not very long after that, we see Patrick open up SpongeBob's award closet and an entire ocean of trophies fall out. This right here definitely gives Squidward's closet full of alarm clocks from the season 1 episode Employee of the Month. I just really have to give praise to this show for doing such a good job of sticking to its roots, yet growing and changing over the course of seasons 1 and 2 in such an entertaining and positive way. On the note of this scene though, I absolutely love the fact that SpongeBob is spending his time off building a gigantic snail out of cards for fun. Of all the different things that he could be doing, it brings a smile to my face knowing that this is how he spends his free time. Of course, it's no surprise that Patrick bursts through the door with just zero regard and completely destroys it. Sadly, he couldn't contain himself and knock like he did in the Untied Shoes episode. He was just so excited that he barrels through the door with the grace and elegance of a startled bull. In all reality, I'm not too sure why SpongeBob decided to build this snail directly in the path of his front door, but on that note, it's his project, so by all means, he can do whatever he wants, I guess. Moving on from there though, we have to touch on what might be my favorite gag in this whole episode. The part where Patrick throws himself on the ground, sad that he's never done anything award-worthy, and SpongeBob hits him with the
But you're Patrick Star. You can do anything you want.
That's easy for you to say. You're SpongeBob.
This is one of my all-time favorite quotes from this season. It might not be the most iconic moment from this episode, but this one definitely deserves praise because Patrick's response is just golden. I also really adore the part where SpongeBob asks Patrick what he wants to do, and his eyes just light up as he explains that he wants to defeat the giant monkey man and save the 9th dimension. SpongeBob ends up suggesting maybe something a bit smaller, and Patrick's answer to that is defeating the little monkey man and saving the 8th dimension. Ever since I was a kid, I've always found this gag so funny. The way SpongeBob keeps shrinking down with every idea that Patrick has was just so SpongeBob, and I absolutely love every second of it. Fast forwarding a bit from there, I have to take a sec to touch on the part where Patrick shows up for his first day of work at the Krusty Krab, and SpongeBob tells him about how lucky he is that he's starting at $50 an hour, considering that when he started, he had to pay Mr. Krabs $100 an hour to work there. This right here, I'm pretty sure was actually our first look at just what kind of criminal Mr. Krabs is. Throughout season 1, he's portrayed as a money-hungry cheapskate, and, well, maybe a little bit crazy as seen by him losing it and eating deep-fried boots, as well as going full-blown pirate over a board game. This right here, though, would be the first point I recall us being told of Mr. Krabs breaking the law. It's no secret to us all of these years later that he's willing to break labor laws and even potentially hide one of his murder victims in a shallow grave, and, well, it's not all too surprising that he would take advantage of naive people like SpongeBob and Patrick, trying to convince them that they need to pay him in order for them to work at the Krusty Krab. They'll believe nearly anything you tell them, so of course he's going to take advantage of that, being the kind of guy that he is. Moving on from there, we definitely have to talk about how hilarious Patrick was working at the Krusty Krab. On the first day, we see him supposed to be serving food for a customer and essentially doing Squidward's job, but instead, when SpongeBob comes up with an order, Patrick just devours every last morsel of food in a matter of seconds. Then, of course, this slowly advances until the point where Patrick ends up eating this guy's entire tray of food right in front of him before he proceeds to spit the food all over the poor guy. I remember seeing this for the first time when I was little and just hysterically laughing until I cried. The whole sequence of events here is just so hilarious. The fact that Patrick can't comprehend that he isn't supposed to eat this food is so funny to me. He's so used to being the customer that having the roles reversed is just too foreign for him to be able to comprehend. Or like that part where he's on phone duty and people keep calling over and over again asking if this is the Krusty Krab.
No! This is Patrick! Oh, I'm not a Krusty Krab.
This right here is definitely up there as one of the most iconic moments of season 2. It might not take the #1 spot, but it's up there without a doubt. This episode really showed us blatantly how, honestly, kind of helpless that Patrick is. The way he's written in this season definitely amped up the stupid factor in his character. It's just a little frustrating if I'm being honest. Whereas in season 1, we would see him doing such things as talking SpongeBob flawlessly through a boating school exam from afar using a walkie-talkie and a telescope, in this season he would be shown literally not even knowing how a broom works.
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
Now of course, I have to give some props for that Stupid Town comment. It kind of reminded me of the last episode we checked out where the boomer fish rolls up and calls Squidward a lady. This season certainly knocked it out of the park with the one-liners, that's for sure. But as far as Patrick sweeping with the upside down broom goes, as funny as it was, it's blatantly obvious that the show's writers really dumbed him down and made him a lot less capable in this season. Like, even in the season 1 episode Tea at the Tree Dome, when Patrick was trying to prepare SpongeBob to go to Sandy's underwater dome full of air, he was giving SpongeBob a ton of advice that may have been stupid and completely incorrect, but at least he was confident in the way that he was giving the advice. As the series goes on, especially in season 3, we would see Patrick becoming a lot less confident and sometimes even quite a bit fearful in his constant confusion. But with that being said, it's definitely pointing out the drastic change in his character, even just in the time frame from season 1 to 2. Moving on from there though, I definitely have to take a second to touch on how hilarious and iconic that the jar scene is.
First, get a jar. Patrick, that's a pickle.
Yes.
Everything about the scene is just pure comedic gold in my opinion. Him struggling to figure out what a jar is, then struggling to find the lid, and of course the moment that he thought he broke it. As hilarious of all of that was though, the fact that Patrick felt so much accomplishment from straight up just opening a jar might just be the funniest part of it all. They may have really tried their hardest to emphasize how helpless Patrick is in this one, but I will say they also emphasize just how good of a friend that SpongeBob is. Throughout the events of this one, he wouldn't once stop believing in Patrick, especially when it came to the point where Patrick didn't believe in himself anymore. SpongeBob was always there to show him support and to help him find something that he could do, to help him find that sense of fulfillment and achievement, even if it was in the form of something as simple as opening a jar. It's always refreshing to see SpongeBob come through in moments like this, helping to build up his friend and supporting him in reaching his goals. Unfortunately though, we would see Patrick taking that support a little too literally, as he vows to straight up be exactly like SpongeBob in every way. He dresses like SpongeBob and tries to replicate literally every move that SpongeBob makes. It gets to the point where SpongeBob can't handle it, so he decides that he's gonna act like Patrick, hoping to get Patrick to start being himself again. However, that just blows up in his face when Patrick has a negative reaction to it.
What's so great about being a big pink loser?
Patrick saying all these bad things about himself was just so sad. It brings us right to the moral of the story here. The message behind this one is that comparison is the thief of joy. It's important to take pride in yourself no matter what it is that you do. It can be hard to do, but once you hone in the ability to be yourself unapologetically, it's a very freeing feeling. If your thing is climbing mountains, then you strive for that peak and be the best climber that you can be. If your thing is playing video games, you grind for that achievement and enjoy yourself along the way. You should never let someone else make you feel like your way of living is wrong, as long as it isn't hurting or exploiting anyone or causing damage. One shouldn't be trying to be like someone else out of jealousy or feeling like you yourself aren't good enough. In this episode, we see Patrick saying these awful things about himself because he's comparing himself and his way of living to SpongeBob, who, I mean, let's be honest, just gets awards for existing. Like, outstanding achievement in achievement? What does that mean? Like, here's an award for getting so many awards? By the end, though, it was amazing to see Patrick happily jump right back into his rock to continue living the way he has been, happily feeling like what he's doing is actually worthwhile. When he gets his award for doing absolutely nothing longer than anyone else, that's his reminder that that's what he enjoys doing, and he's really good at it. Nothing. Just doing nothing. Okay, I feel like the point being made here is a bit of a weird one because it feels like I'm promoting being lazy and not doing anything, but I swear that's not what I'm saying. It's about being yourself and being the best version of yourself, and being proud to be that version of yourself. For Patrick, that just so happens to look like being lazy and sleeping all the time. As we hone in on the end of this episode, I definitely want to point out how funny it was that in the end, SpongeBob was the one getting the package shoved into his mouth by the male fish, because he was dressed up like Patrick. It was a funny little nod to the beginning of the episode, and I never really noticed it before, but looking at it now, small details like that just spark so much joy, as I've said before. As a whole, this episode really is a great one. It was chock full of truly iconic moments and hilarious gags, as well as a worthwhile moral that everyone can learn from. Like I said in the beginning of this one though, I remember it giving me mixed emotions and kinda driving me nuts a little bit. It took a while of reflecting to get to the bottom of exactly why I always felt that way about this one, and I've realized that it's because, like I said earlier, Patrick was always one of my all-time favorite characters. From the start of this show, it's always been a tie between Patrick and SpongeBob for my favorite character. I just can't pick between the two because they're both just so likable for me. Now, this one drove me nuts because seeing one of my favorite characters feel this way always made me feel really sad. Like, it was one thing to see SpongeBob get so sad in the episode Something Smells because everyone was treating him differently and he thought that it was because he was ugly. That was him feeling a certain way as a result of actions of other people. In this one though, Patrick's sadness was rooted in him not feeling like he was good enough. This didn't come about as a result of something anyone said about him or to him. It came as a result of him perceiving someone else's way of living and comparing it to his own. Ultimately, it hit hard on a whole different level. Sure, it's one thing to have your looks called into question, but questioning your entire existence as a person is just so sad. His sadness would morph into anger, and by the end of the episode, he's full-blown calling himself a loser in a fit of rage directed at himself. By all means, in the end, things would see a positive resolution for the most part, but along the way, it would be kind of a tough journey to take in for a moment there. Ultimately, this episode is one that I can look back on and say that I am glad that it exists, even if it did drive me nuts a bit as a kid. Reflecting on it as an adult has me really appreciating the lessons that were taught in this one. I honestly wasn't thinking it was going to go this way, but we're going to go ahead and give this one a solid 10 out of 10 and say that it's definitely a fantastic episode, all things considered. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I wasn't originally going to wrap it up here, but I've had a bit of a change in plans. Going into this, I had planned to approach it like my Season 1 review where I cover 10 episodes in each video, but apparently I had a lot more to say about this season than I did about my first video of Season 1. At this point, we gotta be like, nearly 2.5 hours in? I just know that if I talk about 5 more episodes in this video, then I'm never gonna finish it. So I'm making the executive decision that we're gonna go ahead and finish this one right here. As a result, I guess that means I'll be covering Season 2 over the course of more than 4 videos, but I've gotta do what I've gotta do. There are so many more incredible episodes in this season that I just can't wait to dive into. Looking forward to the future of this review, I'm really excited with where we're going from here. But what do you think? Are you excited to check out the rest of Season 2 with me? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. Of course, I have to give a huge, gigantic shout out with so much love, as a matter of fact, all the love in the world, to my patrons, especially those of you in the true 90s kids tier. I appreciate you all more than words could ever say. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and give a little bit of praise to the algorithm in hopes that it pushes this video to everyone else. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Peace.